The bird had been doing it for 9 nights straight. Nobody could explain it. Nobody asked the right question. Maya had always been quiet at night. Not the trained kind of quiet, not the kind you work toward across weeks of sleep schedules and routines. Just a baby who happened to sleep, who had done so since the beginning so reliably that her parents had stopped listening for problems. Jonah and Priya Ose had a 7-month-old who slept through the night. They considered this luck. They were grateful. They did not think about it. Pepper was a 4-year-old African gray parrot who had lived in their home since before Maya existed. She was Priya's bird, a graduation gift raised in the apartment before the house, before the marriage, before any of it. African grays are known for their intelligence, for their vocabulary, for their uncanny ability to match emotional tones with words they have heard. Pepper had a vocabulary of roughly 140 phrases. She used maybe 30 of them regularly. She had never in 4 years made a sound between midnight and 6 in the morning. Until 9 days ago, the first night, Priya assumed the bird was reacting to a sound outside. A car, a neighbor, something. She went to the nursery, found Maya breathing normally, found Pepper on the crib rail with her feathers slightly raised, and moved the bird back to her perch in the adjoining room. She went back to sleep. It took her 40 minutes. The second night it was louder. Pepper was not just vocalizing. She was using one phrase, the same one, repeated without pause. Priya stood in the doorway at 1:50 in the morning, listening to her parrot say the same 2 words over and over in the dark above her sleeping daughter's face. She moved the bird again. She went back to bed. She told Jonah in the morning. He said it was probably something about the air. He said African grays were sensitive to temperature changes. He had read that somewhere. The third night, the fourth, the fifth. By the 6th night, Jonah was sleeping in the guest room because neither of them were functioning. Priya had started going to the nursery before Pepper even began, sitting in the rocker, watching, waiting, trying to catch the trigger. Maya slept. Pepper watched Maya. At some point between 2 and 3 a.m., Pepper would fly to the crib rail, and the screaming would start. Priya would find nothing wrong. She would move the bird. She would go back to bed. She would lie in the dark and feel the specific dread of a parent who is running out of explanations. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. On the 7th night, Jonah called his sister, who had a degree in animal behavior. She listened for 10 minutes and said, "What exactly is Pepper saying?" Priya put the phone down. She stood in the hall and listened. She had been so focused on stopping the behavior that she had stopped actually hearing it. She walked to the nursery doorway and stood still. Pepper was on the crib rail, feathers pressed flat now, leaning forward, repeating the same phrase she had been saying for a week. It took Priya a moment to isolate the words. Then she heard them. Baby, different. That was all. Baby, different. It was the phrase Priya had used on the day they brought Maya home from the hospital, standing in the doorway of the nursery showing Pepper the baby for the first time, explaining to a 4-year-old bird what was happening in her house. Something is different now. This is the baby. Baby is different. Pepper had absorbed it the way African grays absorb everything. Whole in context, available for retrieval when something in the environment matched the emotional signature of when the phrase was first learned. They took Maya to the pediatric emergency clinic on the 8th morning. Not because anything looked wrong, because Priya could no longer tolerate not knowing what Pepper was seeing. The pediatric resident, Dr. Fenella Okafor, ran a standard panel. Then she ran a second one. Then she brought in Dr. Liam Shaughnessy, a pediatric pulmonologist with 12 years in respiratory disorders. Maya's oxygen saturation was dropping to 82% during sleep. Normal for an infant is above 95%. At 82%, the brain begins compensating. The body begins compensating. Externally, she appeared to be sleeping peacefully. Internally, she was quietly suffocating in increments, 7 months old every night, and nothing in that house was alarmed except the bird. She had a form of central sleep apnea, not the obstructive kind, not the kind with the recognizable gasping, but the central kind, where the brain simply pauses its signal to breathe. Intermittent, silent, undetectable without monitoring. The kind that can cause sudden infant death without presenting any prior warning that a parent could observe. Dr. Shaughnessy looked at the family and said, "What emergency physicians say when the math is too close to measure?" He said, "Your bird was detecting a change in your daughter's breath chemistry. African greys have hyperacute olfactory and auditory discrimination. She was responding to a pattern, the absence of normal respiratory sound, or a shift in the carbon dioxide profile of the room. I have never seen a case like this documented before. But I cannot explain the timeline any other way. Has your pet ever done something you could not explain until it was the only explanation left? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard." They drove home with a pulse oximeter, an apnea monitor, a follow-up with neurology, and a name for what had been happening to their daughter for 7 months of nights. Priya sat in the back with Maya. Jonah drove. Neither of them spoke for 20 minutes. When they got inside, Priya went to Pepper's perch. She stood there for a moment. The bird looked at her, shifted weight from one foot to the other, and said nothing. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never ask for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. What they did next: removing the crib bumpers, installing the monitor, scheduling the sleep study. They did because of a 4-year-old African grey who had 140 phrases and chose 2 of them, 9 nights in a row, to say the only thing she knew how to say about what she was hearing in the dark. The next story involves a dog who refused to let a toddler near a kitchen, for reasons no one understood, until the gas company arrived. Maya is 14 months old now. She wears a monitor clipped to her ankle every night. Most nights, it does not alarm. Every night, Pepper sleeps on a perch beside the crib, because that is where she chose to sleep, and no one moved her again.